What happens when a trusted leader betrays the very people he swore to protect? In a packed congressional hearing room, the air crackled with tension as Representative Jasmine Crockett stood at the podium, her eyes locked on Representative Byron Donalds. The crowd hushed, sensing a storm about to break. Crockett's voice, sharp as a blade, cut through the silence. "You stand there, preaching family values, but what about the families you've sold out?" she demanded, slamming a stack of papers onto the desk. Her words weren't just an accusation. They were a declaration of war. Donalds, seated across the room, leaned back in his chair, his face a mask of smug defiance. He adjusted his tie, as if Crockett's words were nothing more than a breeze. But the documents she held told a different story. They were evidence, she claimed, of Donald's secret meetings with corporate lobbyists pushing a policy to gut funding for community health centers in low-income neighborhoods. These were the same neighborhoods Donalds had promised to uplift. The same people who had cheered his name at town halls. Crockett's team had spent weeks digging, following whispers of backroom deals, and now she had the proof. Emails, meeting, logs, and a draft bill with Donald's name tied to it. "You think you can hide this?" Crockett snapped, holding up a printed email. "This says you met with those suits 3 times last month, plotting to strip health care from folks who can barely afford a doctor's visit. You shook their hands while our communities crumbled." Her voice rose, each word a hammer strike. The room buzzed as reporters scribbled furiously, their pens racing to capture the fire in her tone. She wasn't just calling him out. She was tearing down the image he'd built. Donald stood, his jaw tight, and fired back. "You're twisting the truth, Jasmine. Those meetings were about jobs, not cuts. You're just playing to the cameras, trying to make a name for yourself." His voice dripped with venom, but his eyes darted to the papers, betraying a flicker of unease. He wasn't used to being cornered, especially not by Crockett, who'd been a thorn in his side since they both took office. Their rivalry wasn't new. Donalds had clashed with her over everything from tax policy to education. But this was different. This was personal. Crockett didn't flinch. "Jobs? Don't insult us. These emails show you traded our health for campaign cash. You're not just selling out, you're selling us cheap." She tossed the papers toward him, letting them scatter across the floor. The crowd gasped, some whispering about her audacity, others nodding in approval. She was relentless, her anger fueled by the betrayal of trust. For years, Donalds had campaigned on protecting families, especially black families, claiming he understood their struggles. Now, Crockett was exposing him as a fraud, and she wasn't holding back. "Sit down, Byron," she said, her tone icy. "You don't get to lecture me about truth when you're drowning in lies." The room erupted in murmurs, some clapping, others shouting objections. Donald's face reddened, his hands clenching into fists. He stepped forward, pointing a finger. "You're out of line, Crockett. You think you can smear me with your little stunt? I've fought for our people while you grandstand." His voice shook, but it lacked conviction. The documents were damning, and he knew it. Crockett smirked, unfazed. "Fought for us? You fought for your wallet. Those lobbyists own you, and these papers prove it." She turned to the crowd, her voice softening but no less fierce. "This man stood in our churches, our community centers, promising to have our backs. But when the doors closed, he turned his back on us. Who's he really serving?" The question hung in the air, heavy and accusing. The hearing room felt like a powder keg, ready to explode. Donalds tried to interrupt, his voice booming. "This is a witch hunt. You're making this up to tear me down." But Crockett was ready. She pulled out another document, this one a signed agreement between Donalds and a corporate executive. "Signed and dated, Byron. Care to explain this?" she asked, her eyes gleaming with triumph. The room fell silent again, all eyes on Donalds. He opened his mouth, but no words came. For the first time he looked small, caught in the glare of truth. The hearing adjourned for a break, But the tension didn't ease. Reporters swarmed Crockett, microphones thrust in her face, while Donalds stormed out, his aides scrambling to keep up. The fight was far from over, and Crockett wasn't done. She'd started this battle and she intended to finish it. As she gathered her papers, her resolve hardened. This wasn't just about Donalds. It was about every family he'd betrayed, and she'd make sure they all knew it. Byron Donalds didn't waste time licking his wounds. 2 days after the hearing, he stood before a packed town hall in his district, his smile polished, but his eyes hard. The crowd, a mix of loyal supporters and skeptical locals, waited for him to address the firestorm Jasmine Crockett had unleashed. He gripped the microphone, his voice steady but laced with venom. "Folks, I'm here to set the record straight. Representative Crockett's attack was nothing but a desperate grab for headlines. She's trying to divide us, but I won't let her lies win." The crowd stirred, some cheering, others murmuring doubt. Word of Crockett's documents had spread, and the whispers of betrayal hung over the room like a storm cloud. Donalds raised his hands, calling for quiet. "Those papers? Fabrications. Half-truths twisted to make me look like the bad guy. I've spent years fighting for you, for jobs, for safety. She's the one selling you out with her grandstanding." His words were sharp, meant to cut, but they didn't land the way he'd hoped. Faces in the crowd stayed guarded, unsure. Unbeknownst to Donalds, Jasmine Crockett was already in the building. She'd heard about the town hall and wasn't about to let him rewrite the narrative. As he spoke, she stepped through the back entrance, her presence like a spark in a dry field. The crowd noticed her first, heads turning, whispers rippling. Donalds faltered mid-sentence, his eyes narrowing as Crockett strode to the front, uninvited but undaunted. She didn't need a microphone. Her voice carried like thunder. "You call me a liar, Byron?" she said, planting herself a few feet from him. "You're the one dodging the truth. Those documents weren't fake, and you know it. Want to tell these folks about the extra meeting you hid? The one where you promised to fast-track that bill for your corporate pals?" She held up a new folder, thicker than the last, and the crowd gasped. Donald's face twitched, his confidence cracking. He hadn't expected her here, not with more evidence. "You've got no proof," he spat, stepping closer, his finger jabbing the air. "This is harassment, plain and simple. You're obsessed with tearing me down." His voice rose, but it sounded hollow, desperate. The crowd's murmurs grew louder, some shouting for answers, others heckling. Crockett didn't blink. "Obsessed? No, Byron. I'm just doing what you won't, standing up for the people you betrayed." She opened the folder, pulling out a photograph of Donalds shaking hands with a known lobbyist outside a private club. The crowd erupted, some booing, others demanding to see it. Donalds snatched the photo from her hand, his face contorted with rage. "This is nothing. A handshake doesn't prove a thing." But his voice shook, and the crowd wasn't buying it. Crockett pressed her advantage, her words like a whip. "Nothing? That's you, Byron, cozying up to the man who wrote the checks. You think these folks don't see through you? They trusted you, and you stabbed them in the back for a payout." She turned to the audience, her voice fierce but steady. "He promised you health care, schools, hope. Instead he gave you empty words and secret deals." The room was electric, the air thick with anger and disbelief. A woman in the front row stood, her voice trembling. "Is it true, Congressman? Did you sell us out?" Others joined in, their questions piling up like stones. Donalds tried to respond, but his words stumbled. "I've always fought for you," he insisted, but the crowd's boos drowned him out. He shot a glare at Crockett, his voice low and venomous. "You'll regret this, Jasmine. You're playing a dangerous game." Crockett laughed, sharp and unafraid. "The only one in danger is you, Byron. Truth's catching up, and it's not kind." She handed the folder to a local reporter who began flipping through it, eyes wide. The documents detailed more meetings, more promises, all tying Donalds to a plan that would leave communities like this one without vital services. The crowd's anger swelled, some chanting Crockett's name, others yelling at Donalds to explain himself. He tried to rally, shouting over the noise. "Don't let her fool you. She's the one dividing us." But it was too late. The crowd was turning, their trust in him crumbling. Crockett stood tall, her gaze locked on him. "You divided us when you chose money over people," she said, her voice cutting through the chaos. "These folks deserve better, and I'm here to make sure they get it." The room roared with approval, the energy shifting firmly in her favor. Donald stormed off the stage, his aides trailing behind, but the crowd's jeers followed him. Crockett stayed, answering questions, shaking hands, her resolve unshaken. She'd come to this town hall to hold him accountable, and she wasn't done yet. As she spoke to the people, promising to fight for them, she knew the next battle was coming. Donalds wouldn't go down quietly, but neither would she. The truth was her weapon, and she was just getting started. The fallout from the town hall spread like wildfire, and by the next week, the nation was watching. A televised press conference, billed as a chance for both sides to address the scandal, became the stage for the final showdown. Jasmine Crockett stood at a podium outside the Capitol, her face resolute, the wind tugging at her coat. Reporters crowded close, cameras flashing, as she prepared to speak. Across from her, Byron Donalds adjusted his cuffs, his smirk barely hiding the strain. In his eyes, he thought he could still spin this, talk his way out. He was wrong. Crockett didn't wait for the moderator to start. "You've heard his excuses," she said, her voice clear and fierce, cutting through the morning chill. "Byron Donalds wants you to believe he's the victim, that I'm making this up. But I'm not here to play games. I'm here with the truth." She reached into a briefcase and pulled out a slim black USB drive, holding it up for the cameras. The crowd hushed, sensing something big. "This isn't just papers or photos. This is a recording of you, Byron, admitting you knew what that bill would do to our communities." Donald's face froze, his smirk vanishing. "That's a lie," he barked, stepping toward her, his voice rough with panic. "You're fabricating evidence again, Jasmine. You can't prove a thing." But his words sounded thin, like a man shouting into a storm. The reporters leaned forward, sensing blood in the water. Crockett didn't flinch. She handed the drive to a network producer, who plugged it into a laptop. The speakers crackled, and then Donalds's voice filled the air, unmistakable and damning. "I know it'll hit the clinics hard," the recording played, Donald's tone casual, almost smug. "But the donors are happy, and that's what keeps us in the game." Gasps rippled through the crowd. Reporters scribbled frantically, phones buzzing as the clip went live online. Donalds lunged toward the laptop, his face red. "That's out of context! You edited that!" he shouted, but the crowd wasn't listening. They were staring at him, the man who'd promised to protect them, now exposed as a traitor. Crockett stepped closer, her voice low but lethal. "Out of context? You admitted you'd let our people suffer for a paycheck. You stood in our neighborhoods, looked us in the eye, and lied. You're done, Byron." The words landed like a slap, and for a moment he had nothing to say. His hands shook, his eyes darting to the cameras, then back to her. "You think you've won?" he hissed, his voice barely audible. "You're burning bridges you'll need one day." She laughed, sharp and unyielding. "The only thing burning is your reputation. These people trusted you and you sold them out. I'm not here for bridges. I'm here for justice." The crowd roared, some clapping, others shouting their anger. At Donalds. A man in the back yelled, "Resign!" and others joined in, the chant growing louder. Donald's aides tugged at his arm, urging him to leave, but he stood rooted, his face a mix of rage and defeat. Crockett turned to the cameras, her voice steady but filled with fire. "This isn't about me or him. It's about every family who believed in him, every person he let down. We deserve leaders who fight for us, not against us. And I'll keep fighting until we get them." The crowd cheered, their voices a wave of support. She didn't need to look at Donalds to know he was finished. The recording, the documents, the truth. They'd done their work. Donalds tried one last time, his voice hoarse. "You're all being fooled. She's using you." But no one listened. The crowd turned away, their focus on Crockett, who stood tall, her eyes bright with purpose. Reporters swarmed her, asking for more, but she waved them off, promising to share everything with the public. Donalds slunk away, his aides shielding him from the cameras, his career in tatters. The chant of "resign" followed him, a bitter echo of his broken promises. As the press conference ended, Crockett stayed, talking to community leaders who'd come to thank her. Their faces, filled with hope and gratitude, were why she'd fought so hard. She'd exposed a liar, not for fame, but for them. The truth had won, and she felt it in her bones. She'd taken on a giant and brought him down, not with tricks, but with facts. And as she walked away, the crowd still cheering, she knew this was only the beginning. She'd keep fighting, and they'd be right there with her.